Hello everyone and welcome to the second video of the channel where today we're going to be doing a little something different because I will be covering Superman, the 2025 movie by James Gunn. And instead of trying to review the whole movie in one sitting, I'm simply going to break it down into pieces. Future episodes of this series will be longer than this initial video. And I will conclude the series with an overview of the characters and my final thoughts on the movie. For now, let's get into the movie. So I have my notes here, and the movie opens up with a rolling text on the screen showing as different images of the Antarctic are being shown to us, which reads 3 centuries ago, the first superpowered beings known as metahumans appeared on Earth, ushering in a new era of gods and monsters. This immediately opened up a little bit of a question for me because essentially this is saying that superheroes and metahumans only showing up roughly in the 1700s if this movie is taking place in anything concurrently to us, which is kind of amusing to think about because then that means metahumans only started popping around the Revolutionary War for us here in America, which is very amusing, and I'd almost be more interested in seeing that series than what this movie tried to produce for us. But it also means, are we then going to ignore any more ancient metahumans civilizations on Earth, or will those be worked in later on? It's hard to really tell. Or is it simply saying that metahumans were in hiding because of obviously we have things like the Atlanteans and the Amazonians who are much older than 3 centuries. But that's for future movies to decide. However, I just want to note this might be handicapping the future storyline going on forward. But after that, it says 3 decades ago, an extraterrestrial baby was sent in a spacecraft to Earth and adopted by Kansas farmers. 3 years ago, the baby, now grown, announced himself as Superman, the most powerful metahuman of all. So this establishes that the Superman in this world is already 30 years old, and he has been Superman for 3 years at this point. It's doing something similar to Christopher Reeve's The Batman movie, where instead of jumping and showing us the origins of the character, we're moving forward, and with them being already semi-established at this point. In the Batman, it was for 2 years. In here, now it's 3 years. 3 weeks ago, Superman stopped the country of Boravia from invading Jarnapur, sparking controversy around the world. This is going to be the major source of Superman's personal conflict. However, its execution left a lot to be desired, in my opinion. And 3 hours ago, a metahuman called the Hammer of Boravia attacked Superman in the city of Metropolis. And 3 minutes ago, Superman lost a battle for the first time. So this establishes that this battle then, therefore, was going on for 3 hours straight. Superman was clashing with this guy, which is quite a long time for there to be fighting. However, and of course, the movie then opens with the first scene we saw in an exclusive preview. Superman immediately crashing into the Arctic, completely bloodied, bruised. He whistles for Crypto. Crypto runs over, leaps on him, is grabbing at him, biting at him. And Superman weakly asks him, "Take me home, take me to the fortress." And Crypto drags him to the Fortress of Solitude. And something that immediately stood out to me with the music of this movie was the music used in the preview scene. It was much better, in my opinion, than the music in this final version. In the preview, it sounds more majestic, it's more swelling, it's more heroic. It gives you that sense of awe. In the actual movie, the music doesn't convey this sense of awe or majesty, which you'd think we'd want to hear because this is the Fortress of Solitude. It's rising out of the ground in crystals. It's a very interesting image, but there's no time to really process it. And the music doesn't even try to convey the importance of this moment. So Superman is brought into the fortress and he's taken in by the Superman robots. And I did not care for the robots. Their behavior is the Ooh, we're quirky, we're funny robots. We don't really care how what you think or how we don't feel because we're robots. We're programmed. And it's reflected in the dialogue because Superman it says thank you, and the leader number 4 says no need to thank us as we will not appreciate. We have no consciousness whatsoever, merely automatons here to serve. But then that's almost immediately contradicted because he points out, hail to Superman, meet number 12. She's new. Superman looks over at her and she giggles and says, oh, he looked at me. Which was weird. If they're supposed to be automatons, why do they have these personalities? Why do they react that way to Superman if they're just supposed to be robotic automatons? Again, it's trying to be funny in this, which is unfortunately a running theme with this movie that a lot of uh, moments that should be very tense and serious or significant are undercut by an attempted joke. And I can literally imagine the board meeting going on while they're being shown the test footage of this movie and some executives saying, well, you need to throw in more jokes. We need a joke here. We need a joke here. We need a joke here. We can't let the audience feel too serious about this movie. But it goes on, and the number 4 then says, I put your parents' message on to soothe you. Thank you. And then 4 says to the others, he finds it soothing. The dialogue is so clunky, just like this all the time. It's very unnatural. It's so focused on trying to exposit to you. We got to inform the audience. We got to keep them up. It has no faith in you being able to just take in what's going on. We have to explain it, even if it is to the detriment of the characters. So again, they say, I put your parents' message on to soothe you. Thank you. He finds it soothing, even though, again, the robots wouldn't care, according to their own dialogue. And then here, number 4 goes on a very long exposition here, saying, the message was damaged in transit to Krypton, but what is there? We love you more than heaven, our son. We love you more than land. Our beloved home will soon be gone forever. But hope vitalizes our hearts, and that hope is you, Kal-El. We have searched the universe for a home where you can do the most good and live out Krypton's truth. That place is Earth, and the rest of the message is lost. It's a very long piece of dialogue that goes on as they're sitting Superman down in the chair to be healed by the yellow sun. And this bothered me in the preview, and it bothers me that it made it into the final cut. Because when Superman is being healed by the yellow sun, he reacts and screams in pain, which is a very odd reaction if he's supposed to be healed by this thing. But instead, he's reacting in pain. And the movie then it cuts very briefly to outside in the Arctic, where we see the engineer tracking Superman, and we'll get down to more about her later. But Superman is healed, he gets back up, and he immediately is like, okay, time to get going, gotta get back to the fight. And the robots are telling him, sir, you're only at 83% your health, you need to rest. And this hammer guy beat you at full strength. You are no condition to go fight him. And this moment's immediately undercut because Superman then notices that Krypto has destroyed some areas of the fortress, including his doggy pen. And he tells the robots, I thought you were taking care of him, keeping an eye on him. And they just say, we feed the canine, but he is unruly, and he realizes we are not flesh and blood, and couldn't in our heart of hearts care less whether he lives or dies. Again, this is trying to be quirky robots. I almost feel like someone was trying to channel K2SO from Andor and Rogue One, only they did it so poorly. There's no wit to this, there's no punchline to this joke other than they're robots, they don't have feelings. And that's it. Which is not the emotional investment you want to have, because a later scene that's going to happen in this movie regarding these robots. But moving on, Superman then takes off from the fortress and he flies away. And as he's flying out, we again see the engineer walking to the fortress. She looks up and Superman flies right over her. And Superman somehow did not notice her, even though she's stands out like a sore thumb amidst all the snow because she's in black. And of course, she's also walking right to the Fortress of Solitude. And as Superman is flying, this is where we get the credit logo shot. And I want to note that at this point of a 2-hour movie, we are already 7 minutes and 30 seconds into it. So this was a very long opening scene. So once the credits logo hits, though, we then smash cut to an armored figure, the Hammer of Bavaria, the guy who beat Superman up already. And he's in Metropolis shouting off how your Superman has abandoned you. The people of Boravia will not ignore him, inserting himself into our affairs. And then he lasers a building and blows it up. But of course, they take the time to show everybody in the building ducked and avoided the laser. And there's also a building behind the hammer that's on fire. Because then it cuts over to Lex Luthor's girlfriend in this movie, who is taking selfies. I will talk more about her in the future, but this is pretty much all she's going to be doing. She's just here to take selfies. She's here to take videos, and there's a reason for this, and it's a very dumb one. But here we see Lex Luthor is in his headquarters, and he's got a room full of techies who are all at different monitors and computers, typing away, monitoring the battlefield. They've got drones outside watching the conflict going on. And they're shouting out how one even mentions, oh, there's been no fatalities. Again, okay, we gotta make sure no one dies in a Superman movie. But then one says, well, you can't win them all. Which, I guess this is pretty clear then. These techies are just evil. They're as evil as Lex Luthor then. Because they have no problem with collateral damage or killing or harming innocent civilians. But then Superman returns to Metropolis and Lex directs the Hammer on combat maneuvers, where he's calling out different attack patterns, Z4, 27D, and all these moves. And the way the movie presents it, though, is very strange because the Hammer is shown to be autonomous. Because when Superman arrives, Lex warns him, target at 5 o'clock. And he says, affirmative, turns around and engages Superman. And yet Lex has designed this character where he needs to be able to see the fight going on so he can direct the Hammer on how to physically throw hands with Superman. Which felt very un-Lex Luthor-like. It's not the issue that Lex would make a metahuman who could fight Superman or recruit someone like that. It's that he would need to be in such direct control that he cannot count on this guy to do the job without him literally telling him, oh, Superman's going to swing a punch, use attack pattern alpha beta. It's such a hands-on form of control. And again, this would make sense if the Hammer was a robot or some kind of brain-dead automaton. But he's not. And again, the dialogue in this scene is very exposition. It's very clunky because the Superman is almost immediately knocked down into the ground very violently. He smashes into the ground and it causes a little crater in the city. And a food cart man then sees that Superman's stuck in this hole, and he runs over to check on Superman. And we cut back to inside the tower, and Lex is yelling, yes, 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 yes. Again, very un-Lex Luthor-like, where I've always seen Lex Luthor as being the guy who's in control of himself. He's the consummate businessman. And yet here, he's acting like a Mark Zuckerberg type, which I've mentioned previously, I really do not care for anymore in these movies. I would like to have a businessman who's, again, the consummate professional. And we're back with the clunky dialogue, as I said, because then Yateki goes, "Oh, it's like he knows Superman's every move before he makes it." Oh, another one says, "He does. He's been studying him for years." Then a third one chimes in, "He's developed over 2,500 fight moves for any situation." Again, this is something we can clearly understand if by watching the movie, you cannot, but they do not trust the audience to understand what we're seeing on the screen, so they have to exposit it. And so then one of Lex's techies takes a scan, a visual face scan of the citizen who is helping Superman out of the crater, and he tells them that it's Malik Ali. And at this time, the engineer gets on the comm, and she tells them that the target has led us to the ice castle. The rumors are true. I don't know how this thing hasn't been spotted. And she's standing outside the Fortress of Solitude, which now starts to recede back into the Arctic. So it's fortunate that there was enough time for her to walk all the way over to the fortress, and between Superman arriving and him then leaving, because otherwise she would have no clue what to even look for. And so then Lex calls her off and tells her, "Oh, we'll need more than you to go in there." And he also then tells the Hammer to also pack it in and leave. And so the Hammer then starts shouting off cliche dialogue saying how the United States will continue to feel the wrath of the Hammer of Bavaria, or Baravia, or whatever the country's name is. When we then go down to the crater where Superman is, and he's being helped out of the crater by the citizen, and the dialogue goes, "It's me, Molly. I once gave you free falafel after you saved a woman from being hit by a taxi. Superman, are you all right?" "Molly, you gotta get out of here. It's not safe." "No, you saved us so many times. Now it's our turn." And then Superman looks up and the Hammer flies off with the cliche, "This is your last warning." And then he flies off. And then a random guy standing in the crowd then says, "Maybe you shouldn't have done that thing in Jarnapur, Superman." Okay, that's a weird thing to say right here and now. But this is this is the crux of Superman's supposed central conflict. And we cut back to the techie room where all the techies are celebrating how they did such a great job beating Superman up like that. And again, I guess all these techies are fully on board with Lex Luthor's machinations and plans. They are just all wholly evil people. Unfortunately, again, this will not end up being true by the end of the movie. But then we cut away to the Hammer, who lands on a beach right outside Metropolis, where Lex has a big campsite, a research site set up in the beach, and he then walks through a portal inside one of the tents into a second pocket dimension, only to walk through another portal set up in there to get inside LexCorp, or not even LexCorp, it's Luthor Corp. I don't know why we can't use LexCorp. LexCorp just, it's easier on the tongue. And he's then takes off the helmet to reveal it's Ultraman, who is in a black noir styled disguise or costume, except it looks like he's more ski mask than battle helmet, like Noir from The Boys on Amazon. And meanwhile, while he's walking, the music is going off on this tune that I swear is just some generic music I would have heard from Portal 2. It's a and I've seen a lot of people really glazing this music a lot, and I have no clue why. It's not a memorable villain theme. It's not even an effective villain theme. It's just a generic background music you'd hear in Fallout or Portal. It's not an impressive tune. On to use a previous example, the Hans Zimmer theme for Lex Luthor. That was much more impressive as a villain theme. It was memorable, it was menacing, and it had range to it. It could go from orchestrally bombastic to quiet and sinister. But here, this Lex Luthor tune is, again, it's a very. It's not impressive at all. So then the camera is panning out, showing Luthor Core towers and this central pillar between the central bridge piece between them, where Luthor's headquarters is, and the engineer has arrived directly on top of it. And I'm just wondering, how fast is she then? Because she went from Antarctica all the way here to Metropolis that quickly. She has got to be as fast as Superman then, in order to do that. And we cut to black, and at this point now it's 12 minutes and 30 seconds into the movie, and yet it feels like so much more has happened than it actually has. We then resume the movie with Clark going into work at the Daily Planet. And the first thing we see is him passing by the doorman who's holding a newspaper. On the front cover is a newsreel about Superman's fight with the hammer. Superman gets in the elevator, and we then hear a news broadcast. And this is what the news broadcast says. Do these unelected metahumans think they can dictate international policy? It's outrageous. Which, this is an interesting field to go into, because it's exactly the same thing we did in the previous incarnation with BVS, but of course I very distinctly remember nobody liked that. And yet, here we are doing it again. So, either we don't have any fresh ideas, or people are just change their tunes a lot in regards to what we can and cannot have Superman getting involved in. So Clark arrives inside the Daily Planet. He sees Perry White, tell him to get in, and then we get this conversation with this guy Steve, who, oh boy, if there's a character I wanted booted from this movie, it would be Steve. So this is how their conversation goes. Hey, loser. Hey, Steve. Hey, Clark, what do you got against adverbs, Kent? How are we supposed to know how we feel when we read this malarkey? In sports writing, you learn the sentence is the modifier. And then Clark gets a call from Ma Kent. And this interaction, again, it felt more like it was stuck between trying to tell a joke and trying to actually be serious. Because Ma Kent is shown leaning over the table like this, talking to the phone on the table. And she's talking loudly into it. And she goes, hey Clark, me and Pa just wanted to call and say congratulations on that front page. Boy, is that something. When the front page is about her son getting his ass beaten into the dirt. I think she'd be more concerned about her son's well-being, considering this is supposed to be the first fight he's ever lost. And yet she's not showing any real concern over this factor, as is really anyone else for that matter. And then Steve cuts in, and he goes, hey, ask Ma if she barbecued up any good roadkill lately, like possums or chitlins. And Clark is just, shut up, Steve, and I wanted to say the same thing too. I don't like Steve at all. I think he's a waste of space in this movie. But he says shut up, and then Mom goes, "What's that, Clark?" Even though he was audible through the phone, she could tell he was talking to somebody else. And then he goes, "Sorry, Ma, I'm just in the middle of a big news day." Steve then goes, "What even are chitlins?" And then another staffer, Cat, comes by saying, "Oh, they're intestines." "Thanks, Cat. You read this crud?" Talking about Clark's writing. And Cat's like, "I thought it was great, Clark." And she's like, "Great?" Oh. Then we get back with Ma Kent, who says, "Well, we don't want to keep you, but wanted to say congratulations and tell you we're thinking about you, Clark. It's been a minute." And then Pa Kent chimes in saying, "Tell him don't be a stranger." "Pa says don't be a stranger." "Yeah, I heard him, Mom." "Okay, I gotta go. I gotta run." "Yeah, okay, love you." And he hangs up the phone. And this is where Lois comes in. And all credit to the actress for Lois. I think she turned in the best performance of the movie. I would absolutely love to see more of her in this role in the future. So she starts off going, "So this guy just flew into Midtown and started attacking people, demanding for Superman to show up," to Clark. And he says, "Yeah, it's all there in my article." "Then I'd actually have to make it through your writing, Clark. Knowledge is worth many sacrifices. That isn't one of them." And we interrupted this exchange to show Jimmy being fawned over by two intern girls who I want to note looked like they were just entering first year of college. They looked like they just graduated high school, maybe. They barely look like they're like they're 19 maybe, and they're fawning and giggling over Jimmy Olsen, who is about as unappealing as to any woman as I am. Really, he's scrawny, he's nerdy. He does not look like the kind of guy who would pull girls to giggle about him and call him how, "Oh, he's so fine." It was so weird, but this is crucial. I guess this is what's supposed to be set up for a future twist in this movie. But then he goes, 22 people in the hospital, over 20 million in property damage. It does make you wonder. Lois then asks, "Wonder what?" "Well, as great as he is, maybe Superman didn't think through the ramifications of the Bavaria thing. Of the Baravia thing." Which, this is such a jump in logic to think about. Because, as far as the movie is concerned, nobody knew this. The Hammer Baravia did not exist until now. So for Jimmy to be saying, "Well, Superman should have thought through the consequences," what exactly was he supposed to think about beforehand? That an unknown metahuman was suddenly going to come all the way to the United States and start smashing up property and hurting people out of nowhere because he intervened in a foreign conflict? No, that is not something he could have predicted. And yet this movie is going to keep hammering in the idea that, well, Superman should have thought more about what he was doing. Even though in this movie it's not a black and white, it's a black and white issue. There's no moral issue. There's no gray area for this. It is entirely and unequivocally the correct thing for Superman to have done and intervened in that conflict. And this movie will make it as clear as possible, but it's going to try to have its cake and eat it at the same time too. Because you have this dialogue at the same time from multiple characters saying, well, maybe intervening wasn't the right call to make. Even though, as we'll get into later on, it absolutely was. And Lois then asks if the guy is even from Baravia. So she's already picking up on the obvious question of, well, this guy's never been around before. We've never heard of him. He's never announced himself before. So is he even from this place that he's claiming to represent? But Jimmy's like, well, what do you mean? His name is the Hammer of Baravia. And she then responds, yeah, I doubt his parents named him that, Jimmy. We have no clue what his actual goals was here. Well, I think it's pretty obvious that the goal here was kicking Superman's ass. And then Clark butts in saying, he didn't actually kick Superman's ass. Pretty thorough. And Jimmy's like, pretty thoroughly, Clark. I'm like, Superman, why are you butting in on this? Do you have an ego problem? Is there an image problem with you that you can't handle the fact that you got beaten up? Also, again, you don't seem really concerned about the fact that there was an unknown metahuman apparently running around who did $20 million of property damage, injured and hospitalized 22 people. And you're not concerned, who is this person? Where does he come from? Where could he strike next? Because he's made it clear he'll do it again. But then Lois turns up the volume on the TV. And we see the president of Baravia talking, his name is Gurkos, Ghurkos. I'm not sure how that's pronounced yet. I haven't heard it pronounced in the movie proper. And I'm gonna just be blunt with it. This movie makes a very obvious Israel-Palestine connection between this conflict. And the president of Baravia is what I would call an unflattering Einstein. He has the wild Einstein hair. He's balding at the same time. He's fat. He's gross. This movie is, again, it is not going to try to portray this situation with any moral ambiguity, any complication. It is as black and white as you can possibly be. And the fact that it is very heavily borrowing from a current ongoing conflict felt very out of place and very tone deaf to the situation. But I'm not here to take sides on that. I'm just going to point out that this was occurring to me while I was watching the movie, and I'm not the only one who had this thought while watching the movie. And the president is saying, you show me what ties there are between Boravia and this hammer. And Clark then says, yeah, see, Superman did say he thought the hammer might have been faking a Boravian accent. And I was just like, Superman, what? Just shut up. Just stop talking. What are you doing right now? Why are you doing this? Because then Lois says, Superman said that? Yeah, I interviewed him afterwards. Great guy. You know, it's funny that you keep getting on these interviews with Superman, Clark. Well, I don't think there's anything funny about good journalism, Lois. Uh-huh. And I was just... Okay, isn't the whole point of you having the Clark Kent identity to separate yourself from Superman? And yet, why then are you tying the Clark Kent identity to Superman by claiming to get exclusive one-on-one interviews with Superman? And secondly, also, that feels like it violates multiple ethics of journalism, which for Superman, the Boy Scout of America, I don't think he'd make these kinds of violations. It seems out of character that he would self-publish articles in the Daily Planet paper, puffing himself up, which, again, that feels very wrong to do. But the scene then closes out with Gurkos going, the relationship between Bavaria and the United States has been like iron for 30 years until Superman came along. And there's even a dong, dun, 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 like a very dark, evil chime telling you, ooh, things are getting bad. Because this movie is made for children. And I want to note that we're now at 15 minutes and 20 seconds into this movie. Because we then cut to the Pentagon, where Lex is giving a slideshow video presentation to members of the Security Council, essentially. So he's showing the Secretary of Defense video footage of Ultraman. And he's saying, what you're looking at, my friends, is the most powerful being on Earth, Ultraman. And then the Secretary of Defense said, you created this man. And this is another issue with this movie, because there's a twist to Ultraman's identity. And I'll bring it up when it becomes relevant. But right now, they are very heavily... It was not a surprise at all for me watching this because at this point I already had guessed what it was. Because Ultraman so far, he has the comic book name of an alternate evil Superman. He wears all black. He hides his face even when he shouldn't need to. He was created. I think I know where this is going. It only took one little more piece of dialogue that comes later on to pretty much say, yeah, okay, I knew exactly where this was going. It was so obvious. But again, this movie is not very. I I don't know why they bothered trying to make this a twist of the movie when they could have just done away with the twist altogether. But instead of answering that question about how, oh, you created this man, Lex then says, ooh, check this out. The engineer, a former special operative whose blood I infused with microscopic machines called nanites, which she can form into anything she can imagine. And I was just thinking, so she's from Metal Gear Rising? She's a boss from them? And I was just thinking, oh, it's the nano machines, the nanotech. The magic words to say anything you need. And then Luthor continues going, and of course you're familiar with my flying armored force, the Raptors. And he was just, it's a bunch of guys in very light power suits flying around. And I was like, really? That's your follow up? You've got a guy who's as strong, if not stronger than Superman, who can shoot lasers. You've got a living piece of nanotech, and then you got some armored guys. Some normal dudes. You couldn't have made a few more superpowered characters to go along with this? And then he goes, altogether they're an unstoppable force we call Planet Watch, more than capable of containing any otherworldly threats. Planet Watch? That's the best we could come up with? And also, again, they can contain any otherworldly threats. You have 30 dudes, normal dudes in flying suits. You got a nanotech girl, and you got a strongman. That's all you have. This is not anywhere near as impressive as I'd imagine it could be. And there have been comics where Lex Luthor has been in shows where Lex is perfectly capable of creating meta-humans, especially in this world. Because this world in this movie, oh boy, there is plenty of reason where he should be able to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, with whoever he wants. And so the Secretary of Defense then asks, so you want the Defense Department to hire your metahumans to take down the Kryptonian? Again, this is so exposition heavy. And then Lex says, after Superman acted with violence against our Baravian allies, I think it'd be worth considering. And then we have Randall Flagg, Randall Flagg, or whatever his name was, from Suicide Squad, because we gotta keep that around. And he's like, Big Blue stopped a war. Naive, maybe, but well-intentioned. And then Lex responds with this stupid metaphor, because he then says, well, I don't know the intentions of an unintended fire hose, General Flagg. I just do what I can not to be splashed. And I was like, did someone consult the Rings of Power writers for that one? Because that was a horrible metaphor. It doesn't even make sense on its own level, because an unintended fire hose can't do anything. It's a dead fire hose. It can't shoot water on its own. It's so stupid a metaphor. And Lex is then interrupted by Director Crawley, who's another Suicide Squad character. And she points out that the country of Baravia has purchased over $80 billion worth of arms from Luthor Corps in the past 2 years. Lex then responds, And Sven follows up, and no one would profit more from a war with Baravia and Jarnapar then you, a cynic, might say that having Superman out of the way might not be bad for business. So she has Luthor dead to rights right here, but then his response isn't a rebuttal to what she just said, because he then says, well, what's particularly bad for business is dying. That's not a rebuttal to what she just said. Your business is entirely ensuring that people die, because you want this country to be buying more weapons from you. But then Lex continues, and I have a distinct feeling that's where we're all headed with the Kryptonian running wild. Again, he didn't rebuff her, he didn't respond or counter what she said. He just completely sidestepped it, and no one presses him on it. Because then Rick Flag says, so we're gonna lock up all metahumans now, which was not the discussion we were just having at all. But they're just jumping around and talking past each other. And Lex then says, look, other metahumans aren't going off half-cocked interfering in foreign affairs. They don't have, and I have proof of this, a hidden headquarters in Antarctica that violates 12 international treaties. And they aren't aliens. Which, again, was laughable because, again, there's another alien in this movie. In fact, there's another space cop who gets his authority from aliens in this movie. But Lex and the engineer and other characters keep referring to Superman as the alien. When it's like, you've got other aliens already running around. Why is Superman being an alien so impressive at this point? Because you've already got them running around. Luthor then continues, shouldn't that be more than enough reason for Planet Watch to at least bring the Kryptonian in for questioning? The Secretary of Defense then says, admittedly, I'm not comfortable with a being from another planet as dangerous as him on the loose. But the optics? Superman is popular. And this line, Lex, is delivered very weirdly. It's less so every day, according to a chatter online. It's delivered in such a weird manner that it did not feel like it fit with the rest of Luthor's acting in this scene. Then the Secretary of Defense then says, not to mention the potential risk of failing to contain him. I assure you, Secretary, we can contain him. Then the Attorney General steps in. I'm not even sure why the Attorney General is in a meeting like this. Would he be involved in such a meeting? Or what? But he then says, yeah, they got this stuff. What's this kryptonite stuff called? And Lex just puts his hands on the desk and he looks at him and he's like, it's called kryptonite. The Attorney General is a freaking moron. Even Lex is like, he's an idiot. He even used the name for it in his sentence. But then the Attorney General is like, well, it kills him, right? Then Flag says the most confusing sentence so far in the movie, because he then says, as far as we can ascertain, there's none left on the planet. Huh? What do you mean there's none left on the planet? What? I want to hear more about that. What do you mean there's none left? However, there's no answer to why this is the case in the universe. This is purely a meta-narrative mechanic, because in a later scene, if Lex Luthor had access to actual kryptonite, the rest of the movie would not be able to happen. It has to be an alternative source for this movie to function. And Lex even says, I have a workaround for that as well. And the Secretary of Defense then says, you know what? It doesn't matter, Lex, because without solid proof of malicious intent, it's just not worth the risk. And then he gets up and leaves the meeting. And that's where I'm going to stop this first part. And I want to note, we're only 17 minutes and 50 seconds into the movie. We're only a quarter of an hour of the way through, and this is a 2-hour movie. And so much has already happened. And the foundation is very shaky. And it's only going to get worse from here. I'll see you next time, folks. Peace.